I'm your host, Michael Wiafe.
And I'm your host, Demetria Wack.
This is PolicyWise.
The differences in health outcomes across racial groups has been documented in the United States. Yet, the extent to which socioeconomic inequalities underlie such differences has not received enough attention. Today, we'll be discussing the complex relationship between race, health, and economics. Today with us, we have Kindra F. Montgomery-Block.
Kindra is an executive leader, movement builder, and unapologetically African-American activator who's a driving force behind philanthropy and coalitions that are part of the national Black empowerment conversation. Kindra, this is a long list of things that you've done and things that you're a part of, and I would love if you could introduce yourself and maybe tell us a little bit about your work.
Hi, everyone. It's so good to be with y'all here today and the fellow Wildliers. I am just super excited to talk to y'all, not just about racial justice, but economic justice. I think that they can't have one without the other, and excited to roll up our sleeves. Have a long history with Wildlier, a beloved history with Wildlier, and I consider Maureen Sedonen, who is the executive director, CEO, founder of Wildlier, to be the best in the business. So I'm super excited to come and share our story and the story of Wildlier and how I've got to be part of this movement.
Thank you so much for coming on. Could you please tell us a little bit about your work with the Black Child Legacy campaign? A little bit about what it is and what your involvement is?
Yeah, so the Black Child Legacy campaign is a campaign that is built around, again, kind of health equity strategies when it comes to preventable African-American child deaths. So in Sacramento County, and I'm going to talk to you about the work in Sacramento County, but this conversation around who's dying young, who's dying often, and who's dying in preventable ways is not unique to Sacramento. It just so happens that in Sacramento, it is Black kids that die at a preventable death rate. And so for us, that is when babies are born. So Black women do not have the most healthiest birth maternal outcomes. And maybe y'all are not into having babies right now, and that's real good, right? But when you get there, you want to be able to have a healthy child. You want to be able to have a healthy family. And for Black women, it is more likely that we would have a statistics that would be a birth that would not be successful or would have issues. Child abuse and neglect, that is the death of a child by a parent, caretaker, or guardian. Child abuse is real, y'all, and in the Black community, it's also real. And we're also disproportionately represented in the child welfare system. It's almost the conversation that we have continued to have is what is healthy practices around our communities that are really vulnerable. And then the fourth and third really is around gun violence and gun violence prevention. So you think about what I am dealing with in Sacramento County and trying to prevent from happening is death from young people, Black young people from the age of 0 to about 26. When you think about gun violence and gang violence and who's really affected when it comes to violence in neighborhoods that look like me. I'm excited about that work. Our overall goal is to reduce those preventable death rates, working with public health and a lot of advocate across hospital systems, faith-based systems, school systems, healthcare systems, advocacy systems, Black systems, to really say, hey, why is it that Black kids are dying at almost a 40% rate in these 7 neighborhoods, and we're only 11% of the population of the entire state, the entire county of Sacramento. And as long as they've been keeping death data on how children die, Black children have been at the top of the list on who dies often, who's dying young, and who's dying in preventable ways. And I'll say that again. And so it really was an honor for me, and you guys are going to also have this opportunity as you start to grow in your careers to pivot and to work in Sacramento, where I'm from, and to really build a health equity strategy around saving babies. When I took this particular position, I was 9 months pregnant. And so for me, it was not just about another kind of good health equity sector role. I was carrying the pride of my soul, and I wanted to be able to give that back to our neighborhoods in a really direct way.
Wow. Well, first, again, thank you for being here with us. I mean, there's so much to dive into. on this topic. And so I'm really curious because you did touch on quite a few areas broadly, and maybe you can dive into further specification if you would like. But what do you think is the biggest barrier to having equitable health systems, or to reducing violence? Like, in the work that you do, what is the consistent thing that you come across that you think if we just solve this one, maybe two or three things, that it would make a really big difference?
Well, I think you hit it on the nail on the head there, right? It's not just one thing. It is a multiple levels of things, and there's a lot of research out there, and I can dive into it. What I think YLI did best for me was not just make me kind of street smarts when it comes to organizing and advocacy. YLI actually made me street smart and book smart when it comes to youth development and social justice, right? Like that, those things have to come hand in hand. And if I would say one thing that, as I was on that trajectory to be a real deep youth organizer, and to really understand my community from the inside out, from the youth perspective, one thing I think that we have to do better about is bringing in the economic conversation. I learned pretty quickly in my work that I could run good programs. I could get good results. You give me a neighborhood, you tell me reduce tobacco smoking among young people, check. You say, give me a neighborhood, reduce reduce tardies and absentees. We could do that, right? But give me a neighborhood and change that family. That's a different dynamic. Change that environment of that neighborhood. Change that family to have different trajectories that are not along the poverty lines. Then we have to have a different conversation as youth development specialists to also talk about economic justice in a very real way, and racial justice. White supremacy is real. And I hope that y'all understand that from the most realist perspective that anyone can ever get in their lives, what has taken place over the past 2-3 months, right? And so, Black people, Indigenous people, Native people, Latin people, we can all fight for those things, but it's not enough. We also need allies. And so I am of the mind frame that allyship is the number one thing that we can do to make sure that people have a core fundamental to want to change the most vulnerable populations and neighborhoods. I think we have to have a real conversation around racial justice, and people have to get out of the way of not just playing on the bench. I saw a meme the other day that was like, if you ever wondered what you were going to do if the civil rights or if the Holocaust was lived during your time, you're doing exactly what you would have done right now. And so, get off the bench. Make sure your allyship is up. Make sure that your circle, your family, and the people that you rock with really rock for everybody. And that takes a level of altruism and consciousness and community building that not all of us have. But I'm glad to know that YLI and the folks that really rocked with me almost 15, 20 years ago are now leading dynamically across this nation. And it was because of kind of the street smarts and the book smarts that we got from the work that we grew up with at YLI very early in our careers.
You touched on a couple different points there, and I hope we can get to each of them. But the first that I wanted to talk about was just kind of this idea of economic justice and economic injustice. I was wondering if you could kind of elaborate on what that looks like, what like the approach is, and kind of like the consensus of how that should be achieved, whether it's like a targeted approach or more of a holistic approach by the state to reach each individual population, and also maybe how youth are involved in that process.
Let me see if I could. So, for me, like I said, running programs, having great health equity results is part of what I can pop my collar and say that I can do that, right? We can do that as a community. I can build that infrastructure, and I can do that on a very small scale. When you think about the gravity of the situation throughout Sacramento County, the Sacramento region, and then you go state, nationally, it's small scale. The way that we can move dynamically is if we also have a strategy around economic justice, and that we really start to think strategically about not just the health equity and the racial pieces, but how do we make sure that this economy that we are all living in, until there's a better solution, right? How are we going to participate in a way that brings everybody and raises everybody's boats? Because if not, we're going to continue to have the programmatic pieces, right? The very environmental pieces, the small scale pieces of work to be accomplished by folks that can build. But if we want to take this to scale, if we want massive change, then there has to be a conversation about where is the money? Who's got it? Who does not have it? And how do we build a way where we have better access and equality to building our neighborhoods from the inside out? For me, that really was a pivot about 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago now, when Stephon Clark was killed and murdered by the Sacramento police in the backyard of his grandmother. Sacramento went on fire when you think about the riots and the movement that really was akin to our Trayvon Martin piece. And, me being an organizer and having built an infrastructure in the Black neighborhoods is really able to bring people together and quickly align under Build Black, which really was a focus on, hey, what is going on here in Sacramento? I can look out my desk, my beautiful desk on the river that I have not been in a year at the Sierra Health Foundation, and I can look at the skyline and I can see the downtown area. There's cranes, there's new buildings. We got the Golden One Arena. It's nice downtown. But if you go back to the hood where I'm from, Valley High or Meadowview, or just anywhere in South Sacramento, it literally looks like it is bombed out. And so when you think about the economic center that's really happening for downtown and the disinvestment that is happening in the other neighborhoods, then it's easy to see why Black kids die at 2 to 3 times more rates than any other young people's babies. And it go unnoticed and unchecked for so long until we get some political allies and champions. So I say that to say Build Black is one of my newest kind of projects. Would love for you guys to check out the new Build Black app. And it is our approach at the Sierra Health Foundation and the Center to say we have to be really intentional with our dollar, very intentional about how we spend, who we spend with. In the Black community, it is going to take us over 260 years to catch up between the Black racial and the white racial wealth gap. And that is not going to happen unless we are very intentional about how we build that out of that gap. There are a lot of folks and, most, if not all systems that are really working to keep that level of systemic racism in place. So we never get to catch up, and we're never going to be really beyond that space where we could grow and build together. And I'm in this work to fight against that. And it's not easy, but it's absolutely what I'm called to do. And I'm really proud of that partnership and that work and Build Black, because we're focused on those things, and not only just building economic justice, but against police brutality, lifting the Black voice like never before, and then health.
So you brought up so many things right now, and I'd love to dive a little bit deeper. But first, could you tell us a little bit more about the app? I actually just downloaded it as you were speaking.
That's right, the Build Black app, y'all.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what it does? I'm going to sign up here right now, but I'd love to hear more.
Good. So, when I tell you, much like Maureen Sidonian was the CEO of YLI, I have had the opportunity to be under some really great mentorship and leadership. And my current CEO is Mr. Chet Hewitt, who is the CEO of the Sierra Health Foundation. And, much like Maureen's leadership, I think what I've learned most from them is that they let you have good ideas, right? That they never try to stifle your ideas. If you could do it, Kindra, you can get them kids together and you could march up to City Hall, go ahead and do it. Like Maureen, that was cool, to go to, straight up. Gavin was at the point he was mayor. Okay. Like this. So just those ideas, and Chet does the same thing. And I think I am an absolute idea person. I love ideas. I can't sleep at night because I have so many ideas on how I want to change the world. And so the Build Black app is really part of that, right? If we're going to say we're going to be intentional about that racial wealth gap I just explained to you all, then how the hell else are we going to figure out who is selling and how we're going to be intentional about it unless we have a pathway to actually build that level of connection? And so the Build Black app really is like the Build Black Yelp, right? You want to be intentional about how you spend your dollar with the African American community, then check out the Build Black app, because there's ways that you too can be very intentional about building us out of that racial wealth gap like never before, and not just being about racial justice, but also being about economic justice, because they go hand in hand.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. That is such a cool idea. I love that. For some reason, I can't find it on my phone right now. Michael's technology skills are like way higher than mine. But I'm gonna download it as soon as I can. Wow, so interesting. Really, a very different approach. And I think one that could be taken up in like a lot of different ways. Like, it's such a smart way to address this issue. And I think it comes from like I don't know. I do have a question in regards to the kind of the 260-year mark that you brought up earlier, as far as, the metric that was given to the time in which there's supposed to be like equality finally achieved between races. I was wondering, like, with the app and some of the different policy efforts, and it comes from the idea of like kind of like leapfrogging this gap. Obviously, Build Black kind of implements like technology and education. Are there other ways in which you think that like technology, education, and maybe economic investment will help bridge that gap in a way that wouldn't have been able to happen in the past?
Absolutely. When you think about what drives our community forward, what drives our economy forward, it is technology. And so to not be a part of those discussions, or to be having ideas absent of technology, is to not be forward thinking. I think that for again, back to a YLI lesson of the day, y'all, that upstream model of really making sure you understand why people are actually in the water in the first place that's something that is a tried and true kind of prevention analogy. Maureen used to tell this story. I got two stories. Okay. So Maureen used to tell this story when she's, a very good speaker, a very good trainer. And she would tell the story of the downstreamers, who was a city of folks who basically were EMT, right? They lived alongside of the river in their little homes, and every time there was a body in the river, they would come out, woo, 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 let's get this body. They were real sophisticated at it. They got timers in the water. They got people who come out, get the coats ready, and they would do that. Just do that until one day someone said, well, why is somebody in the river in the first place? We got all this prevention, on the downstream of the situation, but we need to go upstream to figure out what's going on. And that is the approach that you really do have to take. And when you think about racial justice and economic justice, because what happened, our history so long ago, matters why folks are in the river right now. And if you're not going to deal with how they got there, then it's much harder to keep dealing with the crisis. And I think our community has to move beyond that, and a racial justice and economic justice approach supports that. And Maureen tells that story way better than I do, but I always have used that as a way to bring people together and to help them not think just in the moment, but to recognize our history and think how we can get beyond this crisis if we were a lot smarter about who actually is, in the crisis in the beginning, right? Why they're there in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about the way that we have to move forward, like, and also the strategies that have already been proposed, but kind of putting that point on the back burner for a little bit. I wanted to continue this conversation about technology. I've been thinking a lot about how it should be used as a way to close so many gaps and be able to kind of be that unifier in a way, especially during the pandemic. You can get folks, their healthcare through telehealth services. If it wasn't for technology, so many children would not be in school for a year, and gaps would widen even more. But on the other hand, there are some gaps that technology itself creates. And so, I guess with that in mind as well, what needs to be done in order to progress, but progress in a way that doesn't create more barriers or to create more gaps? And what are some policies that might start to do that? Not only within technology, but also thinking that that sometimes things can be done in a way that looks like it's bridging the gap, but is actually making the gap wider.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's a couple of things I think off the top. We got to be able to be real clear about how we're going to open up schools and use this gap year that everyone had to take, right, to another level. There are students that are disengaged. There are families that are, regardless if you did show up with a Wi-Fi bus and a Chromebook, like I got a 5-year-old upstairs right now. This is not easy, right? This is not easy. And so I feel for those parents that don't have the privilege to sit and talk to y'all right now, that are not in the comfort of their own living room, that my 5-year-old and what her teacher is doing is absolutely the best for our family in the middle of a pandemic. That's real, but that's a privilege. And, to operate in a privilege and not afford other people opportunity is not the energy that I do, right? And so I think that it is incumbent upon us to think about the best way to bring schools back online. It is incumbent upon us to think about the best way to think about policies that put students first, not teachers, not politicians, not unions, but just to put the kids first, and to come out on top. I think that schools are one thing. I think that our communities are on fire when it comes to violence prevention. All that old beef that was, really established when the community got real tight again, and you got real turf wars going on again. And we've got to be able to deal with violence prevention in a different way, and that looks different in communities in this pandemic. And so, making sure that conversation around who shows up when our communities are in gun crisis, when there is gang violence, how do we have this conversation around healthy policing practices, if that's even something that we can call it that, right? We got to be able to also put solutions on the table. It's not just enough to go with the rah-rah all the time. And that is something I also like to just, instill in to y'all as well. You got to be able to pull up with solutions. Like solutions, not just that you can talk about, but you can implement. And that's what I'm best at. I'm going to think about the solutions, pull up with a process to implement it. And, let's see what it does to change this world. And you got to be as bold as that. Because it's easy to come with the signs and the Black Lives Matter shirts and, put your fist in the air. But, what you going to do when it's really like, do you got a solution? How are you going to change the world? Who are your partners that's going to help you because you can't do it by yourself? Who's the community that you stand on? Who are your ancestors that you're going to pull strength from? Because this is not easy. And so I would just instill that upon you too, that let's put young people first. Schools is what everybody has access to. Schools is the civil rights movement right now, right? And they have done a disservice over the last year by not providing guidance and not really connecting with those most vulnerable students that were already in a gap, right? And so we got to be very intentional about how we pull all of us out of this in a way that brings about the reciprocity that education really is supposed to afford all of our families, because that's currently what's not happening. But we got to put our voices on that. And then, of course, gun violence rips the soul out of a community. Violence in general rips the soul out of a community. But when you got communities that are so strapped, so tight, and you've got, gangster gun rap, whatever war that's going on, it's real. And so we got to be able to have a very present social media push for what's positive and what's real, and how to do intervention and prevention, and take it to the next level, because it's not going to be just, it can't just be the Black Lives Matter folks and the movement for Black Lives that wants to have conversations around healthy policing practices. We got to have conversations around healthy community, and what that looks like in the midst of, high gun violence and crime in the middle of a pandemic.
Oh, thank you. I want to return to the point that you said about, young people actually stepping out with solutions. For those listening right now, do you have any suggestions for young people about how they can respond to COVID, how they can respond and act to help our communities and schools reopen in a productive way?
Yeah, my favorite thing to do is to support young people. You all have the best ideas on how to touch your families and how to touch young people. You guys are like in this middle spot here, right? And so it's really going to take the awesomeness of your creativity, you guys understanding what the vaccine is and how and what it can do for our families. You're going to have to be that voice, those trusted messengers. We need to be able to have a campaign for young people that really gets information out there, that builds on the health of our neighborhoods first, as a priority for everyone. And there's nothing more important than the platforms that I'm sure all of y'all have around social media to get that trusted message out there. Engage communities of color. Let them build their own message. Let them build their own trusted allyship. We should all be thinking about, should I be a vacciner? Can I go and not only get the vaccine, but be someone that can be trained to give someone else the vaccine? That's what's going to make our communities healthy right now. And so I'm on that fact-finding mission around, am I getting it? Do I give it to my 5-year-old? Should I give it to my mother-in-law and my husband? Those are things I'm working on right now, right? And overwhelmingly, yeah, I want to. And I feel like this community is going to have to make that decision, but young people are going to be the ones that always drive the movement. And so I'm behind y'all.
Thank you. I'm just sitting here listening to you, and it's reminding me of the power that I have as a young person. Oftentimes it feels like we're powerless, even in positions of power. It feels like, and I know Demi knows what I'm talking about. But even as student leaders, it feels like all you can do is just say the thing and hope that other people catch on board. But sometimes, you don't just got to say the thing, you got to do the thing, and really push the envelope in making that difference, and also inspire a lot of other people along the way. And so as we start to move towards the conclusion, I do want to ask, kind of again around the first question that I asked, which was, what is the biggest barrier to young people? I have a perspective, but I would love to know from you who've worked with young people for so long in communities, what is the biggest barrier for young people in order to find their agency, to take control of the communities, and to make the difference that they're looking to make?
That's just it. I don't think there's any barriers for young people. That is just it. The sweet spot about being a young person is that you are young and you're not jaded by all the things that comes with age and knowledge and pessimism, right? You're not in the way of yourself yet, right? You're not trying to figure out how to raise a 5-year-old and be a wife and necessarily try to change your whatever I got going on, right? When I was 23 and in the streets of San Francisco, you could not tell me nothing about what I could change. And it took adult allies like the ones I shared with you today to recognize something special in me, and to put me on a path of least resistance. And so that is what has occurred. And I don't think anything I have done is perfect, but I can tell you that I have tried, and I have tried willingly, and have had some really great results. Young people can change the world. You get a little bit older, but if you believe in the power of young people, you will always believe in the power of young people. And I've been that.
Wow, thank you so much for even taking the time to be on here as a as as a parent and yeah, partner. I know that like any time of the day. Actually, I don't know. I have no idea, but I'm guessing the time of the day is just so tricky. And I really appreciate it. And it kind of guides me to like this next point where what you brought up is like, yeah, like as young people, you're not in the way of yourself yet. Um, I guess what my question is like, what do you recommend for young people so that they don't get in their own way eventually? And, do you have some kind of form of like optimism or just like, yeah, advice along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I think that don't take yourself so seriously. Like this is fun. This is fun. Don't take yourself so seriously. Try and try again. If that doesn't work, the reason um, I think I got good at doing programming and young people, and this is I would try something that didn't work. I would try it a different way, right? I think you have to be really good at that. I think if you're not at the table, pull up a chair, okay, and work your way in. Allies mean everything. You cannot do it by yourself. You need partnerships. Respect the opportunity to break bread. Be professional in how you show up, and don't let an opportunity slip you by.
Thank you. Just to follow up that point, you mentioned earlier that YLI was pretty instrumental in, supporting both like the book smart and street smart
Mhm.
side. To like for young people who are maybe really passionate but don't feel like they have the words to articulate themselves, or maybe don't have like the theories or whatever it takes to kind of back themselves up like with this idea that there's inequalities that exist but they don't have the economic language to follow up with it. Do you have any recommendations as far as resources go for like where they can find that information, or other ways that they can kind of build off of those ideas?
Yes. I would just really, really encourage folks once again that Build Black app. Check out the Build Black website. There's a lot of resources on there on just economic justice and the fight for health equity, and healthy policing, against police brutality. And so there's a lot of resources there. That's my first place I would stop. The other thing is I was like, get involved in your own consciousness, really understand how that $5 or that Cash App or that Venmo, whatever you're doing real quick is not just real quick. It has consequences. And so how you spend your money, who you spend your money with, your allyship, how you build your team, and who you pull off the bench when it comes to how you use your dollar to invest in the things that you believe in is very, very powerful. And so don't be so flippant with it. Understand what it means to spend money in your neighborhood and want better for your neighborhood, and demand that of better of yourself and your friends and your community.
If I can kind of follow up, so as I'm a policy student, and so I think of a lot of issues in like, I guess like a policy lens, which I know the government can't solve all the problems. But the government can do a good amount. I guess the challenge that I face all the time is, um, I guess making difference on a broader scale versus in the direct community. And I think both are equally important. And so as these are kind of two moving pieces, you need the community to thrive and do well. And you need, the broader, I'm talking like statewide or nationwide policies to support that. But then you also need folks on the inside supporting the community. So how was this dynamic work in your work, and where do you think the rubber meets the road between these two?
I would say that all politics are local. And when you do something very local, it becomes regional, it becomes statewide, it becomes national very fast. And so, for example, the work that I get to do on Black maternal and infant health is something that is very local to my work here in Sacramento. But because of the great impact that the community partners have had in our organizing for that, that immediately got the attention of our local, of our national state senator, who was Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is like, yo, Kindra, what are you guys doing over there? I see you, girl. I see you. Come over here and talk to us about how you're able to reduce preventable death rates so fast in Sacramento. Okay, okay. Let me show up at this table because you know I'm bringing my chair. Like, hi, I'm here and I've got solutions. And that's how it happens. It happens that quick, and you have to be ready with those solutions. And when you start doing good work, good people find you. People want to do work with good people. People want to do work with people who get results. People want to do work with folks who are both professional and fun and loving and kind and just. And that goes through no matter what, at the local level, at the regional level, at the state level, and even at the national level, despite what folks may say, right? And so now, Kamala Harris, right, Madam Vice President, is at the national. She's the vice president of the biggest, greatest nation in this world. So get at me what local looks like, because it can quickly go up to what this world can be changed. And we're having conversations around Black maternal health like never before because of her leadership. The things that we were able to do here locally to be able to push and make sure that her level of leadership not only sets the bar for what California Black women want to bring to the table, but what all Black women want to bring to the table when it comes to our national politics currently. That's how fast it happens, Michael. Nothing is just local. What you do and when you do good, that's what happens. And I'm a testament to that and very proud of it.
That's so exciting and honestly, just really inspiring to hear. And thank you for your work. One question.
And there's a lot of people. I just want to make sure there's a lot of people. I look at my Facebook, look at my LinkedIn. There are Black women who are incredible. It's Women's History Month. I could not do this work without a long list of Black women who I stand on the shoulders of. And the opportunity to really represent them in these tables and this leadership is just incredible.
Just following up on one thing you mentioned, which was, despite what people believe, like people who are representing want good people to come to the table and share those ideas. Could you either elaborate on that or maybe talk about, maybe like another big surprise that's happened in this work that you weren't expecting now that you've gotten, so involved?
Yeah, I think that maybe like something that's unexpected.
Yeah.
I did not ever expect to see the insurrection at the Capitol. Like that to me was like, really? It's that deep, y'all. It's really that deep. And we work in the world of social justice and activism, and this world around defeating white supremacy, defeating racism, and have always done, I led many diversity trainings, right? Many type of equity trainings and coalitions and movements around this stuff, to really see the depth of hate for people of color. That was very at that level, you say it, we know it, we move it, but to see it at like displayed like that, and for people to be questioning, is it still white supremacy? Is it still racism? Is it still, that to me is astonishing. I'm still not maybe astonished that it exists, astonished that you could display it like that and still live to see the next day. Like that to me is I'm like, wow, we're really that racist, America? Well, we are. And so it's gave me more passion to fight harder, to really be about systems change at a very, not just kind of my neighborhood level, but at a macro level, that our democracy is in jeopardy, and that the only way we're going to be able to change that level of deep-seated white racism is to make sure that our people have a seat at the table and can be a part of our democracy, and we can elect people that represent us. And it is just that simple and just that hard all at the same time. And so we got to fight more than ever to make sure that that never happens again, that folks that hold that level of allegiance and that level of discussing white racism, that they don't get to represent or make laws for us on behalf of our people.
Absolutely. In this fight, we need all hands on deck,
Mhm.
or as many hands as that will get involved. So we're wondering in our final question, we realize that we're coming up on the hour. So thank you for being so gracious with your time. What would you tell young people and policy professionals listening in on this conversation, and thinking about how these topics play out in their day-to-day lives? What does the day-to-day fight look like for policy professionals, young people, and others who are maybe getting into this work, who are new to this work, or maybe want to incorporate some of the topics that we touched on today into their daily activities?
I'll reiterate what I said before, that we need people to get off the bench. That I can't fight, Black people can't fight, Latin folks can't fight, Native, Indigenous. None of us can fight this fight around racial and economic justice alone. And we need people to join. And we need specifically people that don't look like us to join. And because of that, we need more allies. And I encourage you, your teams, how you build your friendship, who you are allied with, and maybe not figure out who's not on your side, right? That we need more people to speak up and talk about injustice and racial and economic injustice, environmental justice. We need more allyship. And the only way that you build that is by being conscious enough to communicate in a way that is effective, that shows people the level of change that can happen. And so that takes all of us. And so policy people, listen to young people, put the right people around your table. Make sure that the world that you want to see isn't reflected in what you're building. And if you're not, then you're on the wrong side. Like, you can't just play from the bench level. You got to be able to get in. That's what this America requires. That's what our communities require. And so if you want to see change, then you got to be able to, again, pull up and put something on the table. And it can't just be, again, the rah-rah. You can't just come with your fist in the air. You have to be able to have a team behind you. You got to be able to think and provide impact and be strategic enough to do it again.
Wow. Thank you, so much. I would really like to ask you, and I think this would resonate like a lot in the sense of, there's just such a call for everyone to get involved. And yet there is just this, I don't even know how to explain it, this tie between not knowing what to do and wanting to do something. And there's just a lot of barriers in between. For people who want to be allies, do you have an example of a time that you think that allyship was really successful? And could you describe that? I know we're almost over time. And if not, it's okay.
I mean, everywhere I turn, there's so many different allyships. There's nothing you can do alone. You can, Chet always tells me that old wise proverb: you can go quickly by yourself, or you can go further. Was it quickly by yourself?
You can do it all.
Or further. Yeah. So, or you can go quickly by yourself, or you can go further with the team. And so, this is not a short race. This is a long, long, long race. And because of that, who you build your partnerships with, who you build as your friends right now, you, Jared, Michael, those are going to be the same friends when you're 40 like me. And so how you guys understand who rocks what, and who can change, you got a policy, you got a techie, you got a person who's international already. How you guys rock them, that level of strategy is between you and your friends. Literally from YLI, I've got Dr. Vaja Watson. She is the dean of and one of the directors of the School of Education at Sac State. I have one of my dearest friends, Saran White. She's an executive director of a foundation on the East Coast. I have Tamu Norfolk, who works with me here in Sacramento on homelessness. Mael, who ran Wildlife for a long time. I worked at Sierra Health Foundation with when I first got here. Now she's at the School Boards Association. And the list goes on. These are not folks that, I can't just call. I can call on them to create a movement, a whole movement. And so I take these relationships, my relationships, very, very seriously. We all have specialties. Rock your lane. Know what you're good at, so that when you pull up, you can be like, I'm going to do this. And I got, Michael who's going to do this. And I got Jared who's going to do this. And that's how we rock. I have so many just, deep friendships and allyships that I can call any one of them. And like I said, create a movement. And that is from us being on First Street, on the third floor at Wildlife, just pounding pavement, trying to figure out how to change the world, from San Mateo to East Oakland to the Canal and San Rafael to, doing trainings across the nation around youth development and social justice. Yeah, those are the folks that I rock with right now to this day. And they will be the folks that you all get to rock with and create movements with. So cherish this time, cherish relationships, and move them to do better and better and better, and encourage each other, because that's what our team does, and that's how we've been very successful.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to wrap up. Thank you so much for coming on, and hopefully...
My pleasure. Thank you guys for having me.
Good. Yeah.
I learned a lot about podcasts, how to be them better.
You can call on us at any time, I promise. So we'll be there too. Yeah, so perfect.
Thank you both, all of you all, for being so gracious and just hearing me talk. I can talk a long time.
That's great. I could listen to it all day, so perfect.
We wanted to hear you talk.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us on another episode of PolicyWise. We are your hosts, Demetria
And Michael.
Michael and I would love to hear from you. What topics would you like to hear about, and who would you like to hear from?
Check the episode description for a link to our survey. Thanks. PolicyWise is a production of Youth Leadership Institute in partnership with California Forward and their Young Leaders Advisory Council.
Youth Leadership Institute makes sure young people are at the decision-making tables across California.
And California Forward leads a statewide movement, bringing people together across communities, regions, and interests to improve government and ensure that the economy works for everyone.
Jarrett Ramones produced this episode. Social media graphics created by Abby Pugh. And the music was sourced from artlist.io.
If you want to find more great youth content, check out YLI.org and be sure to subscribe to PolicyWise on iTunes and Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, and leave us a review. It really helps.
To discuss this episode, engage with us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at PolicyWisePod, and hashtag your discussions with hashtag PolicyWise.
See you next time for more youth voice and policy discussion here on PolicyWise.